Glad to have you back on Iban Daybreak, and now we move over to the topic of discussion we have today. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, says, contrary to reports making the rounds, it has not discarded the electronic transmission of election results. Spokesman to the Commission, Festus Okoye, in a statement on Sunday said INEC is not contemplating a revert to the manual process of result transmission. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission said on Sunday it would not continue to adopt electronic transmission of results for the 2023 general elections. So now joining us to make sense of this conversation, we have a public affairs analyst, Oluku Matthew, right here in the studio with us. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure.
All right.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure.
All right. Now let's look at the electronic transmission of results and the statement from the INEC. What do you make of the statement, especially the last phrase that said the Independent National Electoral Commission said it would not continue to adopt electronic transmission of results for the 2023 general elections?
Okay. Once again, thank you for having me. I think INEC has to be circumspect in applying so much discretionary power being given to them by the Electoral Act.
Okay.
But you can recall that during the process of the Electoral Act amendment, Nigerians were of the view that INEC should have leverage to determine the mode of election transmission of election results. And consequent upon that, INEC got almost all they needed to give us credible, free and fair election. So it was surprising when we start hearing from INEC that the process of transmission, the process of collation of result is largely going to be manual. For me, I think if you look at particularly Section 60, Section 1 of the Electoral Act, it gives INEC the prerogative right to determine how the election should be conducted,
of course, yes,
and how the election results should be transmitted. Now the question is, if the Electoral Act had given you the discretionary power to determine how to transmit election results, and if you look at their election guideline, they have equally stated that they are going to transmit election results electronically. Now, what is the difference between having transmitted election result electronically and using the result already transmitted electronically to declare a winner? Because I think where the issue lies now is whether the election result have been transmitted electronically can be used to return a winner. Because I think what First Okoye is trying to tell Nigerians is that there is a difference between collation of results and election transmission. Now the question is, because I think the intention of the people who drafted the law is for the law to act in the best interest of the public.
Of course. And
the way to act in the best interest of the public is to ensure that we have free, fair, and credible election.
Yes.
I don't think the intention of the people who drafted the law is to a kind of ambush Nigerians, because Nigerians were on the side of INEC in the build-up to the Electoral Act amendment, to the extent that all we needed is that INEC should have the right to decide how to transmit election results. Now, if INEC have gotten the right to determine how to transmit election results, you are not telling Nigerians that results have been transmitted electronically, that the law does not give you the leverage, the prerogative, the discretionary power to use the election that has been transmitted electronically to determine a winner. I think Nigerians should be wary about it. I'm saying, because I'm not saying they should not be guided by the tenets of the Constitution.
Okay.
INEC is a constituted authority,
an independent
by
body.
the Constitution. So it should be guided by the Constitution. But the question is, if Festus Okoye, who is a lawyer, knew ab initio that the Electoral Act does not give INEC the discretion to use election result transmitted electronically to return a winner, I think you would have elected Nigerians before this stage, so that Nigerians will prevail on National Assembly to capture the amendment in such a way that election result that is transmitted electronically can be used to declare a winner. I quite agree with Festus Okoye, where he said that in the off-cycle elections of Osun and some other places, Ekiti, that the same process is what
carried out.
they followed. That election results were transmitted electronically to INEC portal from the polling units. Thereafter, you collate the return officer move the election result to a different level as being prescribed by INEC. But the argument is this: if, because we are talking of a larger election that has to do with the whole federation, that has to do with about 774 local governments. The argument is, if you collate election result manually, having transmitted result electronically, and eventually a winner emerge and declared by INEC, the argument is, if a litigant goes to court, electoral tribunal in this case, to argue a case of perhaps overvoting, perhaps election malpractice anyway, and if the person needed to prove his case, the time given by the constitution for a litigant to prove his case is too insignificant to even call for a recounting of votes. That is why we must get it right with the issue of electronic transfer of results, so that that result that is transferred electronically should be sufficient to declare a winner and return a winner.
Okay.
So I think INEC is trying to be careful in order not to be on the wrong side of the law. But what I'm saying is, if INEC, Festus Okoye particularly, who is a lawyer, who followed the whole process of constitutional amendment, knew that INEC did not have the discretion to determine whether to use the result transmitted electronically to return a winner, they would have alerted Nigerians, and Nigerians would have prevailed on INEC, on the National Assembly to capture it in the Electoral Act, and prevail on the president to assent to it. But I could recall that even before Mr. President gave assent to that bill, it took international community, civil liberty organizations, everybody was putting pressure on Mr. President before he did the needful by assenting to that bill.
Okay, let me come here. I know you quoted section 60 subsection 1 of the Electoral Act 2022, but according to Okoye now, he said his comments at the time were misconstrued, that wasn't what it meant. That if you go through by section 60 subsection 5, that clause gives the presiding officer the power to transmit votes, registered accredited voters, the results and all of that electronically. I think the gross has to be with the collation of a thing. Transmitting of results electronically is probably not the issue. Okoye is saying that results right there, or at each polling unit, will still be transmitted electronically, but in terms of collation, the manual process still has to be done in terms of getting the sensitive materials, collating the results, and then taking it to various collation centers, maybe regional or zonal and what have you. Now, from what you've said, I mean, you've spoken extensively. From what you've said, you seem to have issues with the fact that even the collation, that's the manual process where you combine, the materials and all, that is still like, a cake, that it should be the electronic transmission that should be sufficient to declare a winner in terms of collating results. Is that your take?
I think we are on the same page.
Okay.
Because what I did say is that I agree with you that Festus Okoye have said that transmission of election result electronically has come to stay. And that they have done it in all circle elections of Ekiti, Osun, and so. But the issue is, I'm saying that if you transmit election result electronically, that election result you are transmitting should be sufficient to be relied upon to return a winner. Because from the analogy he gave, that having transmitted election result electronically, that you need to move the election result, including the accredited voters, total number of vote cast, in a manner that will be prescribed by INEC to a person that will be prescribed by INEC. Perhaps the process of election collation of election results, from polling unit to ward level, from ward level to local government, from local government to state, from state to national. So you see that the whole process of collation of election results, that has been the bane of problem of election malpractice in Nigeria. Because politicians will allow electorates to vote. The process of collation is where you see ballot stuffing, ballot snatching. I'm not saying the result are the in
Polling
the INEC portal is not there for verification.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that the time allowed for a litigant to prove his case is not sufficient to call for a vote recounting.
Okay.
So what I'm saying in essence is we should get to a level where the the election result that is transmitted electronically, it will be relied upon to return a winner.
Okay. Let's look at.
In essence,
okay,
if what we have currently do not capture it to that extent, I think there should be provision for constitutional amendment. Okay. And again, I think some persons who have the local standing to invoke the jurisdiction of the court to interpret that section of the constitution should approach the court, particularly the major political parties, because I don't think Festus Okoye is in a position to interpret the law and its stance. So I think there should be an interpretation by a court of competent jurisdiction. Okay, so do you think this will be, one of those hurdles would, see from various political parties going into the major election in terms of coalition? To be quite honest with you, it has a way of demoralizing people from even voting.
Okay.
Don't forget that the reason Nigerian youths are not participating in the electoral process is because they don't have confidence in the electoral process.
Okay.
So by the time you make electoral reform that will build their confidence, you see youths are ready to participate in the process, like we are seeing currently. You see that there is a new vigor from youth, tenacity from the youths to get involved in the process. But by the time you start seeing statements coming from the electoral umpire, who is the end user of that electoral act, it has a way of sending bad signal to the electorate, particularly the youth. Okay. So for me, I think even INEC should be careful in the way they dish out statement in order not to send wrong signal. Okay.
But this Electoral Act 2022, I mean, so many sides of the divide has commended INEC, the legislators rather, for including electronic transmission of results and all. What other reforms would you have expected to be in that act in terms of ensuring that electoral system is strong and credible enough?
Okay, you see, I think for me, there are so many elections do not just start and end in that on the election day. It's a process. One, I think we should have a situation where we have independent candidacy.
Okay. Yes.
Entrenched in our
electoral
students here. Then again, if you look at our system, you understand that if the police, for instance, the way and manner they militarize our electoral process,
yes,
I don't think is right, because it has a way of sending bad signal, wrong signal to the electorates. It has a way of scaring people from the polling centers.
Okay.
So I think there are laws about that, but it's unfortunate that in Nigeria, most of the security agencies at times circumvent the rule and there's no consequence for such. So I think there should be strong laws to ensure that the polling centers are not militarized.